Today is a Wednesday, October 4, 2023. Russia-Ukraine War Rundown of Key Occasions, Day 588. Battling. The legislative leader of Russia's Bryansk locale blamed Ukraine for utilizing a bunch of weapons against a Russian town close to the Ukrainian boundary. A few houses in the town of Klimovo were harmed, albeit no losses were accounted for. The Ukrainian Flying Corps said it annihilated 29 of 31 drones and one journey rocket sent off by Russia, for the most part towards the areas of Mykolaiv and Dnipropetrovsk, during short-term goes after that endured over 3 hours. Falling trash from obliterated Russian drones caused fires in Dnipro and in a modern undertaking in Pavlograd, two urban areas in Ukraine's eastern Dnipropetrovsk locale. Firemen figured out how to quench the two flames and there were no introductory reports with respect to casualties. No less than 5 settlements endured power misfortune in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia district following Russian shelling. The expulsion of U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy could flag a change in the U.S. Congress on help to Ukraine, with a portion of his potential replacements firmly for helping Kyiv. However, others resolutely went against it. Russian Flying Corps says it designated the Ukrainian military stockroom in Donetsk. The Russian Safeguard Service says its Flying Corps designated a Ukrainian armed force stockroom upper east of Konstantinovka in Donetsk, as per a wire message. There were no prompt reports of setbacks after the strike. In the meantime, we are checking a message post guaranteeing numerous losses among the Ukrainian powers, after a Russian airstrike focusing on a Ukraine garrison in Oleksandro-Kolinov, likewise in Donetsk. Ukraine's military said that Russian powers tried and, tragically, failed to recapture lost positions close to Mala Tokmachka and Verbov in the Zaporizhzhia district over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky examines what is going on with officers in Ukraine's Upper East during a visit to troops on the cutting edge with Russian powers. Russia's protection service said it killed a Ukrainian Neptune rocket off the shoreline of Crimea. Russian flying assaults harmed 3 individuals in the Antonovka region of Ukraine's Kherson area. Russia's protection pastor Sergei Shoigu expressed that starting from the beginning of 2023, 335,000 individuals have entered military help by contract with the Russian military or volunteer gatherings. Exactly 50,000 individuals joined in September alone, Shoigu said. Draft plans from the Russian government show that guard spending will represent close to 33% of the country's whole financial plan use in 2024. Spending under the public safeguard part of Russia's spending plan will add up to 10.78 trillion rubles, $109 billion, 1 year from now, or 29.4% of the absolute arranged consumption of 36.66 trillion rubles. Ukraine's Knowledge and Security Administration, SBU, reported the capture of something like 13 individuals blamed for being Russian witnesses in the southern city of Mykolaiv close to Kherson. Territorial security. The Kremlin said it had not deserted a ban on atomic testing and Russia isn't setting one up. On Monday, the New York Times distributed an examination following conceivable atomic send-off arrangements in Russia. Military Guide. The U.S. military is planning to send Armed Force Strategic Rocket Framework, ATACMS, rockets outfitted with a bunch of weapons to Ukraine once endorsed by President Joe Biden, as indicated by a news report. With a scope of around 300 kilometers, 186 miles, ATACMS gives Ukraine's powers a benefit in going after Russian focuses behind the bleeding edge. U.S. help for Ukraine will run out in several months assuming that conservative hardliners neglect to pass new assets for Kyiv, the White House said. Biden approached conservative place of delegates Speaker Kevin McCarthy to hurry through a new guide, saying U.S. support for Kyiv couldn't be intruded on for any reason. McCarthy was eliminated as the House Speaker in a vote later on Tuesday. The White House said that Biden talked with the European Association, military partners, and NATO individuals about proceeding with help for Ukraine. Biden addressed the heads of Canada, Germany, Italy, Japan, Poland, Romania, the Unified Realm, and France, as well as the heads of NATO, the European Commission, and the European Chamber. UK head of the state Rishi Sunak told G7 and NATO pioneers that the UK was ready to help Ukraine with military, compassionate and monetary help however long it takes. Discretion. Ukraine should win its conflict against Russia prior to joining NATO and the EU, Slovakia's spokesperson said. This is a vital precondition, Miroslav Wachowski said, adding, so we should give our best to assist Ukraine with winning this conflict and recover its power and regional uprightness. The EU might open billions of euros for Hungary in a bid to tie down Budapest's endorsement for help to Ukraine, including a beginning to EU enrollment talks for Kyiv. A senior EU official expressed that to influence Hungary's decision in favor of more Ukraine help, the coalition hopes to take a gander at the situation with EU gifts currently frozen over worries that Hungarian head of the state Viktor Orban has limited the freedom of courts, the Reuters news organization revealed. Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it had illuminated Moldova's minister that passage to Russia had been prohibited for various people straightforwardly engaged with confining ability to speak freely and the privileges of Russian writers in Moldova as well as prompting hostile to Russian feelings. Moscow condemned the choice by Armenia's parliament to support the nation's move towards joining the Worldwide Crook Court, which has given a capture warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Japan's administration has condemned a visit by an individual from the Japanese upper place of parliament to Moscow. Government official Munio Suzuki, 75, purportedly met Russian delegate Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Rudenko during the visit to Moscow. Homegrown governmental issues. Putin may before long report his arrangement to run in the 2024 official surveys, which could expand his hang on power until 2030 when he is 77 years of age. Russian examiners mentioned a 9.5-year prison sentence for an outlaw previous Russian state television columnist. The indictment made the interest during the preliminary in absentia of Marina Ovsyannikova, who became popular for blasting onto a news broadcast with a notice that read "Stop the conflict and they're misleading you." She has been blamed for disseminating counterfeit news, a term utilized against those in Russia who question Moscow's true story on its intrusion into Ukraine. Endorses an exchange. Carlsberg has ended its permit arrangements in Russia after Moscow's choice in July to assume command over its bottling works. The Danish organization said Baltica Bottling Works, which makes Russian brew, will actually want to utilize existing stock and materials from Carlsberg until April 1. Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania have settled on an arrangement to assist with facilitating Ukrainian grain sent out, authorities say. Kyiv has begun chats with the World Bank to get $700 million for crisis backing to the horticultural area this year and next. Russian energy Goliath Gazprom said that Europe is shy of petroleum gas and may confront difficulties in providing clients. Thanks for watching and subscribing to the channel.